What if I told you that the person everyone labels as antisocial or broken because they have no friends is actually operating at a level of psychological evolution that most people will never reach? Carl Jung discovered something so unsettling about true loners that he warned other psychologists to handle them with extreme caution. And what he found challenges everything society has taught you about the value of friendships and social connection. Today we're diving into one of Jung's most controversial observations, that individuals who genuinely keep no friends possess a psychological power that makes them immune to the forms of control and manipulation that govern most human behavior. This isn't about people who are lonely and wish they had friends. This is about something far more profound and, frankly, far more threatening to social order. Before we go deeper, I need you to do something. If you've ever felt judged for preferring solitude, or if you've questioned why you don't need the constant social validation that others seem to crave, type the word love in the comments right now. Let's signal to each other that we're here, that we understand, and let's boost this video so others who need this message can find it. And if you're drawn to understanding the depths of human psychology, especially how it relates to women who don't fit conventional social molds, subscribe to Inner Wise Woman. We explore these uncomfortable truths that most channels won't touch. Hit that subscribe button because you're not going to want to miss what we uncover here. Now, let's be clear about what Jung meant by a loner who keeps no friends. This isn't someone who's socially anxious, who wants friends but struggles to make them, or who's isolated due to trauma or mental illness. Jung was describing something entirely different. Individuals who have transcended the fundamental human need for social belonging. People who are psychologically complete within themselves and genuinely don't require external validation, companionship, or group identity to feel whole. Why is this so rare and so powerful? Because human beings are biologically wired for social connection. Our survival as a species depended on being part of the tribe. Being cast out meant death. So we evolved elaborate psychological mechanisms to ensure we maintain social bonds. The need for approval, the fear of rejection, the drive to conform, the anxiety around being different or standing out. These mechanisms are so deeply embedded in our psyche that Jung called them part of the collective unconscious, universal patterns of behavior and thought that operate below our conscious awareness, shaping how we think and act without us even realizing it. The collective unconscious is like an invisible social operating system running in the background of your mind, constantly pushing you toward conformity, agreement, and group cohesion. Most people are completely controlled by this programming. They don't even know they're being controlled because the programming feels like their own authentic desires and values. They think they're choosing their opinions, their beliefs, their lifestyle, but they're actually just downloading whatever their social group has deemed acceptable. Here's where the true loner becomes dangerous. They've somehow broken free from this programming. They've developed what Jung called psychological immunity to the collective unconscious. They can observe social dynamics without being pulled into them. They can see the invisible agreements and collective denial that hold societies together. And they simply don't need the social reward systems that control everyone else. Jung discovered that this immunity doesn't develop randomly. It emerges through a specific psychological process that most people are too terrified to undergo. Extended, authentic solitude combined with what he called shadow integration. Let me explain what this means and why it creates such formidable psychological power. Shadow integration is Jung's term for the process of confronting and accepting the parts of yourself that you've rejected, denied, or hidden away because they don't fit with your self-image or with what society deems acceptable. Your shadow contains all the qualities you've learned to be ashamed of: your anger, your selfishness, your aggression, your sexual desires, your dark thoughts, your capacity for cruelty. Most people deal with their shadow through projection. They see these qualities in others and judge them harshly, never recognizing that what they're condemning out there is actually what they're denying in here. This is why people who are constantly surrounded by friends and immersed in social dynamics rarely do shadow work. The constant external stimulation and need to maintain their social persona prevents them from ever sitting still long enough to face what's lurking in their depths. But the true loner, the one who keeps no friends by choice rather than circumstance, spends extended time in authentic solitude. And in that solitude, there's nowhere to hide from yourself. Your shadow emerges. All the parts you've been suppressing, all the truths you've been avoiding, all the darkness you've been denying, it all comes to the surface, and you're forced to look at it. This is terrifying for most people, which is why they fill every moment with social activity, entertainment, and distraction. They're running from themselves. But the loner who walks through this fire and integrates their shadow achieves something extraordinary: psychological sovereignty. They become unshakable because they've already faced the worst parts of themselves and accepted them. There's nothing you can shame them with, nothing you can use to manipulate them. No social lever you can pull to control their behavior. Jung observed that once someone achieves this level of shadow integration, they become immune to the primary tools of social control: shame, guilt, fear of rejection, need for approval. Think about how powerful that is. Almost every human interaction involves some level of these mechanisms. We modify our behavior to avoid others' disapproval. We suppress our authentic thoughts to maintain harmony. We perform versions of ourselves that we think others will accept. The integrated loner doesn't do any of this, not because they're trying to be rebellious or edgy, but because they genuinely don't need what these performances are designed to secure. They don't need your approval because they've approved of themselves, including their darkness. They don't fear your rejection because they're complete within themselves. They don't feel guilt about disappointing you because they've established their own internal moral compass through deep self-examination. This is what Jung meant when he said these individuals possess formidable psychological power. They're operating outside the normal human control matrix, and this makes them dangerous. Not in the sense that they'll harm you, but in the sense that they can't be controlled, predicted, or manipulated in the ways that work on everyone else. Jung also noticed that loners who keep no friends develop into what he called dangerous observers. Because they're not participating in social dynamics, they're watching them from the outside. And from that position, they see things that people embedded in those dynamics cannot or will not see. They notice the contradictions, the hypocrisy, the collective agreements to ignore certain truths, the ways groups police each other's thoughts and behaviors. They see how friendships often function as mutual ego validation systems, where people reinforce each other's delusions. They see how social groups create echo chambers that prevent individual thinking. They see how the need for belonging makes people betray their own values and intuition. And because they're not invested in maintaining these systems, they're free to speak these observations, which is why they're often labeled as cynical, negative, or antisocial. But Jung would argue they're not negative, they're simply accurate. They're seeing reality without the distorting lens of social need. And society finds this deeply threatening because it exposes the mechanisms of control that keep everyone in line. The loner who can articulate what they're observing becomes a mirror showing everyone else their own imprisonment, and most people would rather attack the mirror than face what it's reflecting. Now let's talk about why Jung believed that forced socialization, not solitude, is the real psychological sickness. Modern society operates under the assumption that constant social connection is healthy, and that people who prefer extended solitude are defective. We pathologize the loner, create diagnoses for them, and try to fix them through therapy designed to make them more social. But Jung flipped this entirely. He observed that forced socialization, making people suppress their need for solitude, pushing them into constant group activities, shaming them for wanting to be alone, creates profound psychological damage. It prevents individuation, that crucial process of becoming a fully realized individual, separate from collective identity. It keeps people dependent on external validation rather than developing internal authority. And it stops them from ever confronting their shadow because they're too busy performing for others. Jung noticed that many of his patients' neuroses stemmed not from being alone too much, but from being forced into social situations that violated their authentic nature. Introverted individuals who were shamed for their need for solitude developed anxiety and depression. Deep thinkers who were pushed into superficial social rituals felt chronically empty. Sensitive individuals who absorbed others' emotions in group settings became emotionally dysregulated. The true loner, who keeps no friends, isn't sick. They're actually healthy in a way most people never achieve. They've honored their authentic nature rather than contorting themselves to fit social expectations. They've developed self-sufficiency rather than chronic dependency on others for emotional regulation, identity, and validation. They've cultivated an internal life so rich and meaningful that external social rituals feel hollow by comparison. For women especially, this is radical because we're socialized from birth to prioritize relationships above all else. We're taught that our value comes from being connected, nurturing, available, and socially integrated. A woman who genuinely keeps no friends is seen as fundamentally broken, cold, damaged, antisocial. But Jung would say she's actually achieved a level of psychological independence that most women never reach because they're too trapped by these social expectations. The woman who has walked through her shadow, who has established psychological sovereignty, who doesn't need constant social validation, she's free in a way that terrifies people. She can't be controlled through guilt about not being a good friend. She can't be manipulated through threats of social exclusion. She can't be pressured into relationships or situations that don't serve her growth. And she can walk away from anything toxic without the agonizing that most women experience when they consider prioritizing themselves. This brings us to what Jung considered the loner's greatest threat. Not aggression or harm, but freedom itself. The ability to simply walk away, to opt out of systems that others feel trapped in, to say no without explanation or guilt, to expose truths that collective denial agreements keep hidden, to act on personal values regardless of social consequences. This freedom is what society actually fears in the loner, because if people realize they could be complete without constant social connection, if they understood they could develop psychological sovereignty through solitude and shadow work, the entire social control system would collapse. People would stop tolerating toxic workplaces because they wouldn't need the social identity their job provides. They would leave unfulfilling relationships because they wouldn't fear being alone. They would question collective narratives because they wouldn't need group approval to feel secure in their perceptions. Jung concluded that the loner who keeps no friends isn't the problem that needs solving. They're the solution that evolution has been developing. They represent the next stage of human psychological development. Individuals who have transcended the tribal programming that served our survival but now limits our consciousness. They're showing us what's possible when you stop running from yourself and start integrating all the parts you've been taught to reject. So if you're someone who genuinely doesn't need or want close friendships, if you've been judged and pathologized for preferring your own company, if you've achieved that rare state of psychological sovereignty that Jung described, know that you're not broken. You're not missing something essential. You've actually achieved something extraordinary that most people are too afraid to even attempt. You've faced your shadow when others were projecting theirs. You've developed internal authority when others were seeking external validation. You've walked through the fire of authentic solitude and emerged psychologically complete. That's not a deficit. That's power. And yes, it makes you dangerous, but only to systems that depend on people remaining psychologically dependent and controllable. Jung's message is clear. Beware of loners who keep no friends, not because they'll harm you, but because they've achieved a freedom you might not be ready to witness. They're living proof that you don't need what society has convinced you is essential. And that truth is more threatening than any aggression could ever be.